All right, today we're going to be looking at inverse variation and word problems. So here we are going to be looking at direct variation and inverse variation. We have seen direct variation before in Algebra 1, usually with the terms y varies directly with x. So this is when comparing x and y. When one variable increases or decreases, the other one also increases or decreases proportionally. And if you look at what a direct variation looks like, this just looks like y equals mx. It's something that you're used to seeing. But instead of an m, we call that m our a, and that is what we call a constant of variation. So an example of when we use this is the amount of paycheck and hours worked, the speed of travel, and the miles driven. Those vary directly. Now with inverse variation, y varies inversely with x. The product of x and y is constant. All right, so that means that if I wanted to get the constant of variation, if I wanted to get a, I would have to multiply the x and the y together. Over here with direct variation, in order to get the a, we would have to divide the y and the x to solve for a. So they are related to each other. They are inverses of each other. And we're going to be looking at how to use these two equations to answer questions. All right. So let's look at writing an inverse equation. So it says here, the variables x and y vary inversely. So since we're looking at inverse, we're going to do y equals a over x. We're doing inverse. So this is going to be when we do a fraction, right? So it tells us first we need to find the constant of variation. And it says y is equal to 4 when x equals 3. So let's just go ahead and plug it in. So for letter A, we have a y of 4, our a we don't know, and our x is 3. So to solve for a, we just multiply 4 times 3, which is 12. B says write an equation that relates x and y. So now all we're going to do is we're going to do a y equals, but instead of our a, we're going to plug in what our a is, 12, and divide that by x. So this is an equation that relates x and y. And lastly, it wants us to find y when x equals -2. So we're just going to replace our x with a -2. So y equals -6. So the most important part here is understanding which equation to use based on the verbiage. In this case, varying inversely, we're going to use y equals a divided by x. The next one again says the variables x and y vary inversely. So again, we're looking at inverse. So we're looking at y equals a over x. They tell us that y is equal to 8 when x equals 4. We got to figure out a first. So for a, we know that y is equal to 8. My a is what we're looking for. My x is 4. So to solve for a, we do 8 times 4, which is 32. So the equation that relates x and y will be y equals 32 divided by x. Now, what happens when we look at something like this type of question? It says if P is inversely proportional to the square of Q. So we have to write our equation, okay? We have P is inversely proportional to the square of Q. So inversely proportional. So P is inversely proportional, which we don't know what the A is. That's always what we're trying to figure out, to the square of Q. So we're going to put Q squared on the bottom. So unlike y equals a over x, in this case, our x is q squared. Then they tell us that p is equal to 8 when q is equal to 3. We want to determine p when q is equal to 2. So we need to figure out that constant of variation. We got to figure out that a value first. So 8 is equal to a divided by 3 squared, because we want to do q squared. So this is going to be 8 equal to a over 9. So to get the a, we just do 8 times 9, which is 72. And now we want to determine p when q is equal to 2. So we're going to use an equation. We're going to create our equation. Y is equal to 72 divided by q squared. Well, we want to know, oops, and it's not y. It is p. Wrong variable. So p is equal to 72 divided by q squared. So we want to figure out what p is when q is 2. So this is going to be 2 squared. So 72 divided by 4, p is equal to 18. So we had to figure out this equation first. Then we got to figure out our a, and then create our equation to then solve for p. Number 1 here, this is a multiple choice question. It says, which equation shows that p varies inversely as q? So again, p varies inversely. So we know we're going to be dividing a by q. Well, if we look at what our answer choices are, it looks like there is a 10 for the a. Notice how we have p's and q's? So we can rewrite this as p equals 10 over q. All right, well, none of them look like that with a fraction. However, if we get rid of the fraction, we multiply both sides by q, we get pq is equal to 10. And there it is. So it's really important that when we're talking about varies inversely, we know that we're looking at a fraction, how to set up that fraction to easily get our answers. All right, let's look at a word problem here. It says the time in hours it takes to build a playground varies inversely with the number n of volunteers working. So the hours t varies inversely with the number n of volunteers working. So we know that our t varies inversely with n. So it says fill in the table showing the time it would take to build a playground given different numbers of volunteers. Well, it says it takes 10 volunteers 8 hours to build it. So we know that this is going to be an 8 here. Well, we got to figure out for 5 and for 20. So let's write an equation, right? Which we already did up here. We have t is equal to a over n. Well, let's figure out our a value. So my t is time, so that's our 8. Our n is 10. So we're going to do 8 is equal to a divided by 10. So a is equal to 8 times 10, which is 80. So we know that our equation is going to be t equal to 80 over n. Now we can use this function, this equation, to fill in the rest of our table. So if my n is 5, right, we would do 80 divided by 5, and that gives me 16. If I do 80 divided by 20, that gives me 4. So it takes 5 volunteers 16 hours, 10 volunteers 8 hours, and 20 volunteers 4 hours. Now, how long will it take to build if there are 25 volunteers? So we do T equals 80 divided by 25, and we get 3.2 hours. Well, if I wanted 0.2 hours into minutes, how many minutes are in an hour? 60. So that's 12 minutes. So this is 3 hours and 12 minutes. All right, let's look at another word problem here. The time in hours it takes a group of roofers to roof a house varies inversely with the number of n roofers. So very similar. We're talking about time and the number of people. It takes a group of 4 roofers 9 hours to roof a house. So we want to write an equation to relate the number of roofers to the time it will take them to roof a house. So we know that we talks about varying inversely. So we need to write our equation. We know it's going to be T is equal to A over N. And we're going to use this information to help us figure out A. So we know that 9 hours is equal to A over our 4 roofers. So A is equal to 9 times 4, which is 36. So my equation is T equals 36 over N. So that is the equation to relate the number of roofers to the time it will take them to roof a house. We're going to now use this equation to solve B. If there were 10 roofers, how long will it take them to put that roof in the house? So we have T is equal to 36 divided by 10, which is 3.6 hours. So 6 hours, we want to know how many minutes is that. So 0.6 times 60. Did I say hours or minutes? I'm not sure. So we know that it's going to be 36 minutes. So this is 3 hours and 36 minutes to roof a house. Now we're going to look at what we call combined work problems. These are the ones where a lot of people get a little confused, but once you know the formula, it makes it really simple. So I'm going to give you a formula that you're going to use to do all these kind of combined work problems. So the way this looks is we have person number 1 plus person number 2 equals together. So the info that we know about person number 1 plus the information for person number 2 equals the information for together. Well, the information that they give us is usually how fast one person works or what they complete in an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it is. So this is some sort of a ratio, and it's going to be the ratio of the project or the area to the time it takes them to complete the project or area. And we do that for both people. And that equals to the project or the area that they want to complete over the time together. How long does it take for them to do or complete that project together? And we're going to use this to help us solve these problems. Now, it's really important that when we're looking at this time, that these are the same units. Those must always be in either all hours or all minutes or whatever it is. It has to always be the same units. Okay, so let's look at our first problem. It says Hannah can paint a room in 16 hours. Destiny can paint the same room in 12 hours. How long will it take for both of them to paint the room together? Well, logically, it should take less than 12 hours because if Destiny alone can do this in 12 hours, logically together, they should be able to finish this more quickly. Well, we want to figure out, well, how many hours can they figure this, paint this room together? So Hannah's our first person. So we'll look at Hannah's information plus Destiny's information equals our together information. So Hannah can complete one room in 16 hours, plus Destiny can complete that same room in 12 hours. So together, that same room will take them how many hours? That's that X hours. We don't know. So I'm just going to write this at an equation without the units. Notice how they're all in hours, so we don't have to convert anything. So this is 1/16 plus 1/12 equals 1 over x. And now it's just solving rational functions or rational equations. Because these are fractions, we need a least common denominator. In this case, it's going to be 48. So here, I'm going to change 16 and 12. We want to make this to 48. So we're going to do 3 over 16 plus 4 over, oh, not 16, sorry. Oh, eraser. 3 over 48 plus 4 over 48 equals 1 over x. And now we're going to combine here. So we get 7 over 48 is equal to 1 over x. Because now we have a fraction equal to a fraction, we can cross multiply. We get 7x equals 48. Divide both sides by 7. We get x equals 6.9 hours. So this is 6 hours, and well, we need to multiply 0.9 times 60, and we get 54. So 54 minutes. So together, Hannah and Destiny can paint that same room in 6 hours and 54 minutes. All right. Same type of problem. Paul and Steph are painting a wall. Working alone, Paul can paint half the wall in 1 hour. Working together, they can paint the whole wall in 84 minutes. How long does Steph take to paint the wall by herself? So here, again, we're still going to be using that same formula. We want Paul's information plus Steph's information equals our together information. So Paul can paint half a wall in 1 hour, right? Which means if I double the wall, so one wall, I got to double the hour, being for 2 hours. So, because I don't want to put a fraction in my numerator. I don't want to put 1/2 over 1. So I'm going to change this to one wall in 2 hours. So that's Paul. Steph, we don't know how many hours. Who knows? And that equals to, together, that same wall, it takes them 84 minutes. All right, we have different units. So is it easier to convert hours to minutes or minutes to hours? If we do minutes to hours, we're going to have decimals, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So let's change everything into minutes. So instead of 2 hours, right, we know that 2 times 60 is 120. So this is going to be 120 minutes. We'll change this to minutes as well. And now we have all minutes. All right. So my fraction here that we're going to create, move this, more space. We have 1 over 120 plus 1 over x is equal to 1 over 84. So what I'm going to do first is I want to leave that 1 over x by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 1 over 120. And this leaves me with 1 over x equals to 1 over 280. So we can cross multiply here if you want to. Also, we can see that these ones are the same, which means my x is just 280. Just depends on how you want to solve that. If we cross multiply, we just do 1 times x is x, 1 times 280 is 280, and that is the number of minutes. So 280 minutes. How many hours is that? So we just have to divide that by 60, because there's 60 minutes in an hour. And that gives me 4 hours and 40 minutes. So that's how long it takes Steph to paint her one wall. All right, let's look at some multiple choice questions. You'll see some of these on your test. So I just want to go over some of these. If x varies inversely as y and x equals 12 when y is 3, what is the value of x when y equals 9? So when we're looking at something like this, again, varies inversely, y equals a over x. We need to figure out a first so that we can then solve this problem. So remember, to get a, we just multiply x times y. So we're going to do 12 times 3, which is 36. So we use y equals 36 over x to solve our problem. When y is 9, we're trying to solve for x here. So in order to do that, x is equal to 36 divided by 9, which is 4. And there's your answer. What I want you to do is I want you to try the rest of these problems on your own, and then we